Hello, everybody, and welcome to Money and Change. My name is Ira Robinson, and as always, we're here with Stu Shear. Hello, Stu.
Hi, Ira. How are you doing today?
Heck of a day so far, but I'm not minding. It's a pretty good one.
Well, actually, the humidity here in Ohio isn't all that bad today, so that's not that bad of a deal. And we've got some information for everybody today. And one thing I want to give a shout out to the people at the University of Findlay in Findlay, Ohio. I guess you'd call that my alma mater. And we had a good time up there a couple of weeks ago. Got a tour of the campus and talked to some very nice people up there. And so it's a good university with a lot of good courses, a lot of good professors. It's a great place to visit and a great place to go to school. So if you are looking for a college and you want to go online, University of Findlay is the place to go, findlay.edu. And with that, next week we're going to do an encore edition because I will be in the great state of Michigan. And we'll be hanging out there for a few days and enjoying, hopefully, cool, clear Michigan air. Unless something blows over from Chicago, and then at that point, it'll be time to get on the gas mask. So, anyhow, with that, we have a disclaimer before we start the show, and the information contained in this presented material is from the posting of news agencies on the internet and are not necessarily the views or opinions of the owners of this program. We are not responsible for and expressly disclaim all liability for damages of any kind arising out of use, reference to, or reliance on any information contained in this broadcast. The information provided is not offered as financial advice, financial planning, or for investment purposes, so you want to use this information at your own risk. Now, from the currency chart from xe.com today at 4 o'clock, the euro dropped a penny. It's down to $1.10. The Great British Pound, wow, it dropped. It was $1.32 last week. Now it's $1.29.5. So the Brexit is starting to affect the pound. The Australian dollar went up a penny. It's now at 75 cents. The Canadian dollar dropped a penny. It's down at 76. The Swiss franc, it dropped a penny. It's down to $1.01. The Japanese yen, well, it stayed the same at 9/10 of a cent to the US dollar. And here's something that's strange with the Chinese yuan. About 4 weeks ago, it was 15.2 cents to the dollar. Then it went to 15.1 cents to the dollar. Then last week, it was 15 cents to the dollar. And today, when I checked, it was 14.9 cents to the dollar. So they're devaluing their currency. I don't know what all the reasoning behind their devaluing their currency, because they've been buying a lot of gold lately.
They have, yeah.
I don't know, latest report, I think earlier in the week it was like 300 tons of gold. And they got that off the Shanghai market, if I remember that correctly. But you're looking at the value of the yuan renminbi is down to 14.9 cents. I don't know what's going to happen. I know they have a lot of supply from overproduction. And a lot of places aren't buying because they don't have the interest in people, because they're not out and buying to be buying, if you know what I mean. It's not like, oh, let's run to Wally World and we'll get a new big screen TV.
Yeah, just because it's on sale.
Yeah. And, it was $600 last week. Well, it's down to $500 this week. And now we better buy groceries. So what does that tell you? People are being a little bit more cautious with their money. And you take a look at gasoline prices. Now, I don't know what they are in Indiana where you're at, but here it was $1.96. And when I went out to get it today, it went down to $1.94.
I think the last I knew it was around $2.15 or somewhere around in there. So,
Well, in 25 miles from here, it's $2.35. I mean, it's all over the gamut. And around here, if Speedway sets their price, everybody has to follow it, or else drop it a penny. Except one time, somebody at Speedway really messed up, and they were 50 cents higher than anybody else, and the other guys made the money. And maybe
whoops.
Speedway didn't have the employees that weekend or something. I don't know.
Whoops.
Yeah, it was a big whoopsie, all right. I mean, you drive by and it's like, what do you mean 250? And then you go, gee, it's $2 here. I'm not going to pay 250 just to go to Speedway. I don't know about you. Mama didn't raise no dummy.
Yep.
Maybe a mental midget, but not a dummy.
I'm not
So
I'm not loyal to gas stations, that's for sure.
yeah, I look at them, and I learned that when I was at University of Findlay, by the way. We would go to the major ones, and in that town, it was Marathon Oil was the big one, and it still is and we'd look at the Marathon prices, and they would be one thing. And then we go out to Working Men's Friend, really off-name place, or we'd go to Certified, and we would get cheaper gas. And being college kids, you had to watch your money. And we later found out that Marathon was selling gas to those guys. It wouldn't be a Marathon truck pulling in there, but somebody would buy it from Marathon and then go ahead and truck it in and sell it to those smaller dealers. We got the same gas at a cheaper price. Who'd have thunk it, right? Well, that's what happens. They have all different brand names. And so, I'm not partial to any one brand, but I do watch. If something looks like it's a really off brand, I'm not going to put bad gas in my car.
Oh yeah.
Motors are expensive to repair these days,
That they are. You'll definitely pay the price later.
especially when it's just going out of warranty here at the end of the month. So I have to watch that. So, you know what? We'll have to keep an eye on the Chinese yuan. Now, the Kuwaiti dinar stayed the same at $3.31. Well, if you're holding dong, Vietnamese dong, it got a little bit heavier. For some reason, it went up to 22,297 even dong for the dollar. So the wheelbarrow got a little bit heavier. Bitcoin dropped. Last week it was $664.55. Now it's down to $644.92. And we all know about gold. 3 weeks ago it was $1,315.50 an ounce. Then it went to $1,341.72 an ounce. And now it's at $1,366.29 an ounce. So the gold price is going up. That indicates to me that people are getting scared and they're buying more gold. The more scared they get, or as we say here in Ohio, the scareder they get, the higher the price goes. And that's what's showing. And I just heard Gerald Celente was saying on YouTube today on the Greg Hunter show, he said he can't really predict how it's going to go, but he kind of thinks that once it hits 1,400, it'll easily go to 2,000 an ounce. Who knows? I mean, I can't predict it. He just looks at trends. I look at trends too. I'm not a financial analyst, and neither is he. But the way that we look at things, gold prices are going up. And the way the situation in the world is, things are going up too. It's going to be probably a rough row to hoe the second half of 2016 into the first half of 2017. Silver, wow, silver went up a little bit. Last week it was $19.78 an ounce. Now it's $20.28 an ounce. And I would call that the poor man's gold because the prices are low. But maybe eventually it'll get up there too in value because it's used commercially in manufacturing, and it's going to become a little bit more scarcer than what you would normally see. Platinum. Wow, platinum went up to $1,098.99 an ounce. And palladium, wow, it took a jump. It was $605.72 an ounce. It went up to $618.77 an ounce. So that's a jump there. So that's from the currency market. And like I always tell people, and I've done this for 3.5 years now, I tell people, look, pay down your debt, put some money aside, get some long-term food, be able to have enough water on hand to be able to purify the water, make sure you have plenty of meds. Those are the five basic things. Past that, you want to make sure that if you're going to invest in precious metals, do it sensibly. Just don't go out and buy it to buy it. Look at your total situation before you attempt it.
People can definitely get into that kind of mindset where they're thinking they have to get as much of it as they can, no matter what, even if they have a lack in other areas, they have to get this to make up for it. You're right. They need to be sure that their own business is handled first. That's the last kind of step. If you have the excess, if you have the extra, then go for it. But don't do it until then.
No, do it sensibly. Okay, do it sensibly. A friend of mine out in Arizona was telling me that, oh, if the world goes to hell in a handbasket, that's another phrase we use here in the Midwest, hell in a handbasket.
Yeah.
It burn right through the basket. But anyhow, he said, no, you have individual buckets. You go out to Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever, and you get these big plastic buckets with lids, and you put meals in them so that you get 4 days worth of meals for 4 people, and you pack those buckets. And if an emergency situation happens, you grab that individual bucket and throw it in the back of your car and take off. That's okay. Just make sure you have plenty of water. Make sure you have a bug out bag if you need one. Make sure you have the cooking utensils to heat the water to add to the stuff that you're going to cook. And that's kind of like being prepared. So, things are getting scary out there. The more scarier they were. For example, earlier today, I was down at the lodge. I went down to attend another meeting, and I thought, well, with all these shootings in different places in Dallas and so forth, some people were tying blue ribbons. And I thought, yeah, I'm going to go out. So I went to Wally World, and went out there, and I got the widest, bluest roll of ribbon I could get. And yeah, I went and I tied some on the flagpole and some on the doors at the lodge and so forth to show support for law and order. And I'm for that. I'm not for looting. I'm not for shooting people and so forth. And so hopefully people are going to see the blue ribbons that I've tied there, and they're going to say, hey, all cops aren't bad. They're really good people. Trust me, I know a bunch of them. And they can be funny and they can be serious. But, I digress too much. Well, let's get back into the financial markets. There was an interesting article, on Zero Hedge. And it said, fearing confiscation, Japanese savers rush to buy gold and store it in Switzerland. And it said Japanese is pushed farther away from being the nation that embraces the Krugman era and economics, and deeper into the view of the Bernanke area economics of helicopter money. I guess where you just fly over and drop the money out of nowhere. The gold price is up double digits in the past month, and as we said in previous articles, something big is coming as Japan appears to prime itself for helicopter money. With the yen soaring and the whole negative rate thing going on, the Japanese savers are understandably concerned about the future of their savings. And to be sure, Japan's thirst for gold is hardly new. Well, they even have vending machines over there that vend gold chains and so forth. Well, as Bloomberg reported, in the face of a clear lack in trust in Japanese leadership with the Abe regime, local investors are buying gold to store in Switzerland. And the reason they are increasingly worried about confiscation, which is why they are storing it halfway around the globe. And the number of buyers jumped 62% in the first 6 months from the second half of 2015, said Atsuoko Sato Whitehouse. Boy, that's a mouthful. Head of Japanese markets at the London-based Bullion Vault investment service. And he said that this week. And he said that the clear action of gold buying comes from only months after it was reported on increased demand for safes in Japan. Look no further than Japan's hardware stores for a worrying new sign that consumers are hoarding cash. The opposite of what the Bank of Japan had hoped when it recently introduced negative interest rates. Ooh, negative interest rates, remember that. Wall Street Journal wrote earlier this week that signs are emerging of higher demand for safes, a place where the interest rate on cash is always zero no matter what the central bank does. However, something has changed, and it's almost as if Japan has expected the ghost of FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, to arrive soon and confiscate their gold. Many of our Japanese customers think it's too risky to hold gold bars at home, and they want to keep them in Switzerland because they are anxious about the future of Japan. And if you remember, during the Depression, FDR confiscated the gold. He said, we'll gladly give you paper money. And if you don't give us your gold, we'll give you 10 years. Holy cow, 10 years in jail. And a lot of people gave up their gold, but some people said, oh, what gold? I don't have any gold. Some of them went to jail. Probably some of them with really good money and attorneys got out of it. So that's what's going on in Japan. And probably Switzerland's very glad to hold the gold. Very glad to hold the gold. Well, in Bloomberg, there was an article that said 500 tons of gold that show global rise in investor angst.
Well, I was going to say, one thing for sure. I have lots of room here in my house. If they want to drop the gold off here, I'd be happy to watch it for them too.
Well, I'd even come over in the middle of the night and watch it.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd watch it go from your holdings to my holdings. But getting across the border into Canada, Indiana doesn't border Canada. I know I'd have to go through Michigan. Well, I could always stop off at Win Schuler's in Marshall, Michigan, have a good dinner while I'm hauling the gold.
There you go.
Yeah, anyhow, 500 tons of gold. It said, global gold holdings have expanded by more than 500 metric tons since bottoming in January in a signal of investors' rising concern about slowing growth. And remember, we always talked about, growth slows, people buy more precious metals. And then as things get better, maybe they sell some of that back. Well, now they're buying it up, and that's driving the price a little bit higher. And the article went on to say banks, including Goldman Sachs Group Incorporated, raised their outlooks for gold after the vote, while yields on 10 and 30-year treasuries have touched record lows. And they're saying gold rallies. It says Goldman raised its 3, 6, and 12-month bullion targets by $100 an ounce last month, citing a flight to safety by investors, while Singapore-based Overseas Chinese Banking Corp, that's a mouthful, has flagged the potential for bullion at $1,400. We're at $1,366 right now. Maybe they're planning to push it up to $1,400 an ounce in the near future. So people are holding gold. People are also holding other precious metals too. But before you do, make sure you look at things sensibly. Just don't get it to get it, because you may have to eat, and you cannot eat silver. You cannot eat gold. You could probably eat with gold and silver fillings, but going with the money end of it, if you're going to invest in precious metals, like we've said before, be sensible about it. Don't just do it to do it. There's another crisis coming up. And we talked last week about Deutsche Bank, and probably I think the week before about Deutsche Bank and some of the problems that they were having with their derivatives and the amount of bad loans that are out there, some of their hedge funds and so forth. Well, back in Zero Hedge again, there was an article that came out, a look inside Europe's next crisis, why everyone is finally panicking about Italian banks. So now we have the German bank, which is Deutsche Bank, and then we have the Italian banks. Something's not looking right there. And the article said back in May 2013, there was an article called Europe's EUR 500 billion ticking NPL, non-producing or non-performing bad loans, time bomb. And in that article, they laid out the biggest financial danger with the European banks, or the NPLs, the non-performing or bad loans. And the article said Europe's non-performing loan problem is such an issue that there is increasing bluster that the ECB, the European Common Bank, may take this garbage on to its balance sheet, since policymakers realize that bad debts and non-performing loans, or NPLs, reduce the capacity of lend, hindering the monetary policy transmission mechanism. Well, here's the simple way to look at it. The bottom line is, at its core, it is all simply a bad debt problem. And the more the bad debt, the greater the ultimate liability impairments become, including the deposits. Now, here in the States, if you give the bank $100, they can loan out up to $900. That's a 1-to-9 ratio. Realistically, it should probably be a 1-to-5. But I'm not a banking expert, but 1-to-9 is kind of stretching it in my thinking. I don't know about yours, but that's
Yeah.
that's getting it out there.
Yeah, definitely.
So, you take a look at bad loans. Gee, what do we have in the States? Remember when the Fed said, oh, you can give out these loans up to 125% on homes, knowing full well the people they were loaning the money to weren't going to pay it back. But oh, they were getting some money in, and we had the housing crisis. Well, over in Italy, they're having bad loans over there. And according to the article, it says the bomb appears to be on the verge of going off, or may have already quietly exploded. It'll go poof. That's my Italian for the day. And, or big a boom. It go big a boom. And nowhere is it more clear than in an exhaustive article written by the Wall Street Journal, in which it says Italy's insolvent banking system, and blames what else? The hundreds of billions in non-performing loans on bank books as the culprit behind Europe's latest upcoming crisis. And they said in Italy, 17% of the bank's loans are sour. In other words, they're bad. That's nearly 10 times the level in the US, where even at the worst of the 2008-2009 financial crisis, it was only 5%. Now, one major bank, which was Banca Monte dei Paschi di Siena SPA. Boy, that my Italian's getting better. Bad loans were so thick, it assigned a team of 700 people to deal with them and create a new unit to house them. Now, Brexit, according to the article, could lead to a full-blown banking crisis in Italy. And the risk of Eurozone meltdown is if Brexit concerns are not immediately addressed, said Lorenzo Codogno, he was the director of the Italian Treasury. Well, when the financial crisis of late 2008 hit, Italian banks tended to roll over loans whose borrowers weren't repaying on time, hoping an easing would take care of the problem, say Italian bank executives. And Italian bank struggles have led to the first serious test of a model of the EU adopted 2 years ago for banking woes. The Italian government has sought EU permission to inject 40 billion, that's with a B, euros into its banks to the system. I'd say, why didn't they catch it in the first place? You got non-performing loans. I mean, my God, you got the mafia over there. Call up the mafia. Hey, Don Corleone, go over to Pedro's house. He hasn't paid up. We need our money. And then Corleone would probably take 10% off the top and they get their money.
Yep.
You know, it's either that or somebody gets a head in the bed, a head of a horse, a head of a chicken. Well, I watched the movie. I think you did too.
Yeah.
Or they get a wrapped up piece of fish. I mean, the mafia would collect it. But to let all those loans go bad, I mean, 17%? Man, that's bad. And, I mean, Italy's got some business over there. They've got some tourism business. They've got some manufacturing business. But to have 17%, that is just
It sounds like really
awful.
bad management to me. And I've dealt with a lot of bad managers over the years, and there's kind of one way to deal with bad managers, right?
Fire them?
That'd be the one.
No, I got it. Turn them into politicians. Take the bad managers and turn them into. Well, wait a minute. We did that.
Yeah, that worked out real well, didn't it?
Yeah, they're like middle management and federal government. Oh well.
They go from bad managers to wonderful bureaucrats.
Yeah, yeah. Well, last year more than 100,000 investors in four small Italian banks that were wound up in this whole debacle saw their investments totally wiped out. Some lost their life savings. The controversy exploded in December after Italian news media reported that a retiree committed suicide after losing 110,000 euros in savings instead of one of the banks, or invested in one of the banks. I mean, banks close, you're out of luck. You don't have some money at home or in a safe place, you don't have some precious metals, you're in trouble. Well, it's happening over in Italy. And if the banks go bust, hey, it's a big a boom. And that's the way it goes. And what's going to happen over here? That makes it even scarier. Speaking of scary, at marketwatch.com, Sue Chang had an article. China is headed for a 1929 style depression. 1929 style depression. Everybody needs to look that up. Go back to your history books and learn something from it. There was a guy by the name of Z, Xie. His first name was Andy. And Andy Z was writing an article and talking to people about an inevitable explosion in China, the world's second largest economy. And Z, now working independently and based in Shanghai, says the coming collapse won't be like the Asian currency crisis of 1997 or the U.S. financial meltdown in 2008. And in a recent interview with the MarketWatch, Z said China's trajectory instead resembles one that led to the Great Depression when the expansion of credit, loose monetary policy, and a widespread belief that asset prices would never fall contributed to rampant speculation that ended with a crippling market crash. Didn't somebody ever learn anything in history class instead of sleeping in the back?
I see so many people failing on history, that's for sure.
I mean, if you don't learn from history, history repeats itself.
It absolutely does.
And you're looking at expansion of credit, loose monetary policy, 19 all over again. And the Chinese would probably say, well, it didn't happen to us. It will. Good grief.
It's
And,
definitely on its way over there, that's for sure.
what?
It's definitely on its way over there.
Well, it is. They've got a housing crisis bubble over there. They've got other bubbles that are going to pop. Their currency is going down. Of course, I think that they're managing that, hoping that people would invest more in. But as it goes down, a few points at a time, it's scary to look at that drop down. I would say that, with all the gold that they're holding over there, you would think that the price of the currency would instead go from 14.9 cents to the dollar, would be like 16, 17, 18 cents to the dollar because of the worth. But that's not the case. They've got other problems there. And according to Z, half the country's debt propping up real estate prices and heavy leverage in the stock market is indicating conditions are ripe for a correction. So what's the correction? A recession, a depression? And he says the government is allowing speculation by providing cheap financing. China is riding a tiger and is terrified of a crash, so it keeps pumping cash into the economy. It's difficult to see how China can avoid a crisis. Yeah, it's going to happen. And when people over here aren't buying things made over there, they get stuck with all this stuff. And what do you do with it? You have to discount the price to get it back out. You just and stop producing. So then you have to lay people off. And the problem of it is the Communist Party that controls China doesn't know what to do. They don't know how to handle a capitalist economy. So, we're going to have to take a look at China. We're going to have to take a look at Italy. We're going to have to take a look at Germany out there. And you take a look at an article that was in Superstation 95. They said, according to an analyst, Deutsche Bank is insolvent. Value now minus 300 billion euros before derivatives are even counted. And they said Deutsche Bank's insolvent, according to an analyst who says the bank is worth a negative 300 billion euros. When the derivatives are factored in, the bank is worth almost negative 1 trillion euros. And comparisons of Deutsche Bank to Lehman Brothers and its crash are appropriate. They said the big German bank is a rotten, festering, fetid corpse puffed by fake liquidity and covered by leaky patches. Its heavy losses come from every conceivable sector and collapse. It's a global bank octopus with appendages and tentacles in everything. And remember when we talked about Deutsche Bank and possible American banks that are tied in with them? You get a sick animal with tentacles into other areas. Doesn't the sickness go to whatever it's holding on to
That
or
it does.
connected with?
That it does.
Domino effect. Negative estimates reveal the bank has a net worth of negative 300 billion euros without considering the derivatives. And that's scary. I mean, Deutsche Bank is deeply involved globally in all manner of rotten arenas like the pigs' sovereign debt. And if you take a look at the pigs, it's Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. The LIBOR interest rate market, they're tied in with that. The London Interbank Offered Rate. And remember, they were accused and later fined for rigging the markets. They're also into U.S. Treasuries, diverse junk bonds, the European energy market, Russian Mafia investments in London, and a lot more. Holy cow, Russian mafia investments in London? Deutsche Bank's in trouble. And, it's scary. There was an article that came out that was attached to this one, said in January and February of this year, reports surfaced that J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs had arrived at the Deutsche Bank offices, and they were allegedly doing their shark routine to pick over the available assets. And the process is very complex, made more challenging by the interwoven parts with the other big Western banks in several asset classes, just like with Lehman Brothers. To see JPM, which is JP Morgan, and Goldman Sachs on the scene was a death knell. And when Deutsche Bank goes under, it will make the 2007 and 2008 financial collapse look like a hiccup, according to the report. And it'll be a financial tsunami that sweeps around the planet. And Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan's involved. Maybe they're trying to buy up what's available, but here's that octopus with the tentacles. And you could just see a lovemaking fest of octopi with all their tentacles connected. And a sick one passes on another sickness to another banking group. It's getting scary out there. Now, to boot, Superstation 95 came out with an article that says collapse spreads to Germany. $29 billion Bremen Landesbank on the verge of failure. That's another bank. And they were tied in with Deutsche Bank. Somehow, some way. So that's another bank going down the tubes. Then Superstation 95 had another one. Boy, they had a run on them this week. Third British fund locks down. Investors cannot get their money. Things are getting bad fast in Britain, according to the report. A third major investment company has now locked investors out of their own money, preventing withdrawals from accounts. And they listed domino effects.
Which I was just going to say, this is exactly what we were talking about a year ago when we were talking about Greece, that this exact same thing was occurring there.
Oh, we ought to be working for Gerald Celente and Trends. Yeah, we're seeing trends here, and you take a look at this, you've got the domino effect going on. And according to the report, domino number one, Standard Life INV property drops 15%, trading in fund is suspended. Standard Life has been forced to stop retail investors selling out of one of UK's largest property funds for at least 28 days after rapid cash outflows were sparked by fears over falling real estate values. And they said, domino number two, Aviva, AVIVA, suspends trading on Aviva Investors Property Trust. This came out of FT, Financial Times. Aviva Investments said it prevented retail investors from selling out of its £1.8 billion UK property trust since Monday afternoon. And cited by Bloomberg, Aviva said in an email that market circumstances which are impacting the wider industry have resulted in a lack of immediate liquidity. And then you go on to domino number three. M&G suspends trading in M&G Property Portfolio Fund. And Bloomberg reported that M&G suspends trading in property portfolio feeder funds, according to the statement on their website. And it said investor redemptions in the fund have risen markedly because of the high levels of uncertainty in the UK commercial property market since the outcome of the European Union. Gee, you invested. You go take your money out and they say, oh, you can't take your money out for 28 days. Now that's scary.
Yeah, and like I said, this is exactly how things started in Greece. They started off with the investment funds not being available to those that had invested into them, and then it went into the banks where they weren't able to even pull out their money from the banks. Is that what we're going to see happen in Britain because of this?
Well, not only Britain, I think you're going to see it in Europe.
Yeah, Europe in general.
And I would say 6 months to a year later, you might see it over here. It depends on how interconnected all the banks are.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me concerned because I know that when the Brexit vote went through, they were talking about the fact that it was going to take 2 years for them to, you know, exit, right? But what's going to happen in that 2 years? Are we going to see a situation where they are going to say, okay, well, we are going to allow you to exit the trade agreements and so on and so forth, but the banking agreements have to still stand and the money must remain where it is?
It's going to be rough. I mean, it is going to be totally rough.
I mean, weren't they told that in order to exit the EU, they would have to pay something like 12 billion or 12 trillion euros into the European Union for debt,
Yeah. I
for
mean,
their debt.
well, and it's like, okay, you don't want to be part of the club anymore. You owe us.
That's it exactly.
You know, that's almost like, okay, you have a loan. And in your loan agreement, there's an early withdrawal or an early payoff fine. They want their money. It's just like with a cell phone. You get a brand new cell phone and you agree to 2 years of service and you're going to pay that company for 2 years of your cell phone service. And at the end of a year, you really get ticked off with them and you say, I'm not going to buy your service anymore. Oh, well then, okay, you want to quit, then you owe us X amount of money for quitting, even though we did give you lousy service. Can you hear me yet? So that's a problem. Um, to get out of the club, you got to pay. And the club's a rotten club to begin with. And at least one commentator that I listened to this week from England said, at least we have our sovereignty back. And that's a good thing. Let Britain decide what they want to do. Don't let a bunch of unelected bureaucrats make rules and regulations that the people don't want to follow. And I think
Exactly.
that's why they had Brexit. Well, I'll tell you what, in Bloomberg, Jeremy Hodges and Susie Ring, Ring, pointed out that three former Barclays traders found guilty in LIBOR case. Holy cow. Three more? And they still haven't got the big wigs. I mean, I was going to say, where's Iceland when you need them? But I think now, where's China now that you need them? Iceland just puts them on an island way out in the middle of nowhere. China takes care of the problem. Not that I'm patting the Chinese on the back, but I think they're on the right move. And we talked about that last week. But three more traders. They were talking about Jonathan Matthew, Jay Merchant, and Alex Pabon, Pabon, were convicted last week of conspiring with other Barclays to rig the London Interbank Offered Rate, or LIBOR, between June 1st, 2005 and August 31st, 2007. And the jury on Monday couldn't reach verdicts on Stylianos Contagulas, whoa, that's a mouthful, and Ryan Reich. The judge placed reporting restrictions on the initial verdicts last week until the jury finished its deliberations. A sixth ex-trader, Peter Johnson, the main LIBOR submitter, pleaded guilty to manipulating the rate in October of 2014. The 290 million pound, or $384 million Barclays fine 4 years ago triggered a global scandal that transformed LIBOR from a niche rate to a brokers and traders into a phase that became synonymous with banker greed. Man, I would say at the least they ought to act like Iceland. Find out who was rigging it and throw them all in jail and throw the key away. I mean, they cheated a lot of people out of money. Well, there was an article in Superstation 95 by Mike Snyder. He published it in the economics blog. and he talked about what a currency crash looks like. And I'm going to post that up to the website moneyandchange.weebly.com, and you might want to take a look at it there. The entire cyber network, there was another one in Zero Hedge, is compromised. Clinton emails are the least of our worries, according to the report. It said Hillary Clinton's emails and server misconduct are the least of our worries. The fact that her server was receiving files that passed through or originated on the State Department servers is enough to know that she exposed her private system to hackers. The U.S. system has been compromised for years since before Hillary tapped into her new network. Michael McCall, a Texas congressman and chairman of the House Committee on Homeland Security, called Clinton careless and said she potentially did harm to national security. And he said this in a write-up. He said, one thing is clear from FBI Director Comey's announcement today, Secretary Clinton was not fully honest in her representation of her use of email to the American people. She was careless with classified and sensitive information and potentially did harm to the United States and our national security. Secretary Clinton will have to answer and to be held accountable by the American people. Well, gang, there are back doors, and I'm not a computer specialist. I used to be a commuter specialist. I used to drive I-75 all the time to work. And in the morning, dodging traffic in Dayton was a real bear. But as a computer specialist, I'm not. But, you know, that they brought out in the report that, yeah, you can get into the computer system. A good hacker can get in. And
A
they were
good
saying,
hacker can get into the system in 10, 15 minutes max. I mean, it's not as difficult to do as it's claimed. I mean, yeah. Let me just put it to you this way. The biggest concern that I have is that there are constant attacks that are going on. I think that we are in a World War III situation, but it's being fought cybernetically. We see constant attacks that are coming in from China, Russia, other places. A lot of them are going through China. They get sent from Russia through China into America. Same with Korea. But when it all comes down to it, what they are aiming for is things like the power grid. So if they get into the power grid and shut everything down, boom, it's done. So it's not difficult. We see these attacks happening constantly.
well, yeah, and there was one, I forget, what's the website that you can see that happen?
It's Norse.com.
Yeah, Norse.com.
Norsecom. Yeah, Norsecom.com.
Okay, well, there was an island off the coast of Antarctica that was constantly trying to get into the US. And I watched that site from time to time, and it kept coming from this island. And they said, well, gee whiz, there's nobody on that island. Well, then how's come the email connections or the internet connections are coming out of that island?
Yeah.
What country is running that island? It's not Russia and it's not China.
It's Norse-corp.com. That's the one. Sorry, I had misspoken
Norse
dash corp.com.
Okay, well, we'll have to take another look at that. But they were saying that in the article that a rebuild of the system to correct this is still about 2 years away, according to some sources from Zero Hedge. There's new concerns about current integrity of the Swift platform and what problems may be lurking within it that have yet to discover. And the Swift is the banking connection in Basel, Switzerland. It's an interbank financial trading system. And that's going on, and you take a look at, oh, gee, Windows 10, you have to have Windows 10. Get Windows 10. And then you find out that, gee whiz, Windows 10 likes to listen to what you do. They like to suggest what you want to buy because
Yep.
they watch what you do, and then they send this information out to manufacturers or people that sell things, and then you get all this information coming in like, here, try this. It's new, it's improved.
Yes, sir.
And, we were talking about this off air, I think a couple of weeks ago, and I was pushed and pushed and pushed into getting Windows 10. And I thought, okay, I got to check up on this. And I found a way to go in and turn things off in the settings area. But it's about 13 pages of things you have to read to turn off. And some people were saying that Cortana listens to everything you say. Windows 10 has control over your camera and so forth. Well, you have to go in and turn that off. I did find one good thing about Windows 10 is the fact that it starts up quicker. There's a lot less junk in there. So, hopefully I've eliminated some intrusion by Microsoft. And if people are going to download Windows 10, yeah, it works quicker. It's got some nice bells and whistles on it, but it's too intrusive. So you need to make some changes. Speaking of changes, I'm looking at the usdebtclock.org. And man, oh man, the national debt is now 19 trillion 345 billion 215 million and climbing. And the debt per citizen is 59,719. But for those who don't pay and they dump it on to everybody else that pays, the debt for taxpayers 161,650 bucks. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And the U.S. federal tax revenue is up 3 trillion, actually 3.3 trillion dollars and climbing. And they're saying that the revenue per citizen is about 10,333, and the revenue per taxpayer is about $21,261. But then you take a look at the unemployment, the official unemployment according to the feds, 7,303,952. Gee, but the actual unemployed is 15,202,274. Hopefully somebody finds a job, but it's going to get more difficult. And when you do that, and things get tough, what do you do? Where do you go? Well, go to moneyandchange.weebly.com. Please check out the website. We've got our blog, we've got hot news, we've got national bank and national debt and currency information. Bankrate.com is there. We have a be prepared section with a bunch of interesting emails from a lot of different people. And it talks on how to store food, how to control your food cost, how to build a disaster kit, you know, cheap medical supplies. And it's a real cutie. You get to see the nurse, the prepper nurse, actually going into a Dollar Tree store doing some shopping. There's also a thing for those of you that are diabetic. There's a listing there about my diabetes emergency plan, and it's posted by beprepared.com. And it talks about everything if you're a diabetic, things that you need to have. And then what about after the disaster? Okay, after the disaster hits, what do? You have to take a look at things. On the after the disaster now what page, survival information on anything. Bugging in, what's the plan? 8 ways to improve your business plan. Take a look at that. Know your risks, know your operations, know your employees, know your customers and contacts, know your finances. Do you have disaster insurance? Do you have catastrophic business insurance? You better check into it. And then if you take a look at the do-it-yourself section, there are videos and instructional things on how to make a Faraday cage, how to make a Berkey water filter. Instead of paying a couple $100, you could probably do it for about $100 or less. How to check your water for lead. Hey, and what happens if the SHTF, the crap hits the fan, and you need sanitation? What do you have in a sanitation kit? Well, it's there. It's all at moneyandchange.weebly.com. And I put that information out there to help people help themselves. I don't get paid for this. I donate my time and my research to the show to hopefully help some people out. And that's what life's about, helping people out. And if you haven't checked things out, go to the very last section in the humor section. The Wrinkle City Gazette is there. And there are all kinds of different stories. And the motto of the Wrinkle City Gazette is mostly Bravo Sierra, but it's free. And it's been on the web for over a good, I'd say 10 years. And it talks about different funny things that can happen in any small town. And, here's one I'm reading from it. It says, Skeeter and Bubba are quietly sitting in a boat fishing, chewing tobacco and drinking beer. And suddenly Bubba says, I think I'm going to divorce the wife. She ain't spoke to me in over 2 months. And Earl spits overboard and takes a long, slow sip of beer and says, better think it over. Women like that are hard to find. And you take a look at a lot of different things that go on. So we have a lot of different stories in there and, a lot of different things to take a look at. And so if you get a chance, go to the humor section in moneyandchange.weebly.com and back in the humor section for the Wrinkle City Gazette. And you too might be able to watch the picture of the divorced Barbie doll. Or you might be able to find out what's going around town in Wrinkle City. Well, Ira, with that, I'm just hoping that people do the 5 things we've always talked about. Number 1, pay down your debt, put some money aside. That's number 2. Number 3, buy long-term food supplies and set them up. And you can go to Wally World or any place else and get big bags of rice and beans and few flavorings to go with it, and some other important things, long-term food. Also, make sure you have a way to store water and have plenty of that on hand and a way to purify it. And then also, if you need your medication, get medications and store them up. And another thing too, and I'm going to throw this in here, 2 other things. Get yourself some multivitamins, because in a grid down situation or in a depression, you're not going to be eating what you'd normally eat before this whole thing started. You're going to take some multivitamins and make sure that you have a supply of those. I don't care if it's gummy bears or the big bedpan bullets, as they used to call them, that don't dissolve, or the chewy vitamins. I don't care, but make sure you have some multivitamins. And the last thing, take a look at colloidal silver. Read up on it. See what it can do. It might be a help to you.
And you can learn how to make it yourself as well.
That's right. You can take some of that silver that you have and drill a little hole and put a wire through it and put it in some distilled water, run some current through it, and you can make your silver solution from there.
Yep.
It's great for infections. But with that, that's all I've got this week. And like I said, next week there'll be an encore version, and I'll let you know what happens in Michigan.
Sounds great, Stu. Thank you as always for being here. Make sure you guys go to lnmradionetwork.com and donate and subscribe to help keep us on the air. And don't forget moneyandchange.weebly.com, and you guys can get all of the newest information as it gets released. We'll talk to you again soon, Stu.
Okay.